The Royals made another trade to add to their bullpen, but what do we think about that said move? We're going to tell you next on this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're also on YouTube and we're on Odyssey. As for YouTube, be sure to subscribe because we're trying to get to 1,200 subscribers by opening day. That previous mark set at 1,000 was already absolutely shattered about 50 days before opening day. So the new goal is now 1,200. And hopefully we got a lot of new subscribers this week. I arrived in Surprise, Arizona last night, spent the afternoon at the ballpark today, getting a couple of interviews. Not really sure yet how we're going to promote those interviews. They got to be kind of quick in the clubhouse. So only get to talk with a player or two about 2 minutes apiece. So not really worth it to play over the air, not really worth it to play in an episode. So I might try to find a way to release them in some sort of folder where you guys can check them out. I talked to Matt Sauer today, talked to James MacArthur, pretty good interviews there, and also had the chance to see some live BPs from Seth Lugo, Daniel Lynch. Got a couple of options of seeing live one-on-ones basically is what you can call them. There's just a pitcher and a hitter. It was the catching group today, so it was Freddie Fermin, Tyler Cropley. I did see Carter Jensen take Will Klein deep about 420 feet to right center field on a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. So some pretty cool stuff that we were able to observe day one, at least for us, for the Locked On Podcast Network down here in Surprise, Arizona. Also getting some content for 810 WHB down here with Seren Petro, having a blast and really enjoying some great weather. There was college baseball right 20 feet from us, from where we are broadcasting, or at least getting some interviews today. We'll be down here till Wednesday afternoon. Flight's not going to be till Wednesday evening. So still plenty of more content coming your way. I know it's a little bit of an unorthodox room that I'm in. It's usually not the same as my typical podcasting background here, but at least we got some signage here with the Locked On Royals logo here in the background. Because I wanted to get to this episode last night. Didn't really have the time to, and hadn't really set up the connection yet. So that is going to be the biggest priority moving forward, is making sure that we got somewhat of stable connection. It's never going to be simple, never going to be easy. Technology never is, I guess, for lack of a better term. This is always going to be a progress for us. If we don't get it out in the morning, hopefully we'll have it tomorrow afternoon. This will only be our episode for today. I know I kind of teased doing 2 episodes. Not going to be likely. Too much stuff going on tonight, but back to a normal schedule tomorrow. It should be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Not going to have too many hiccups. The only thing I would say is if we do not have good connection or strong connection. There's a lot going on. So if we do not have the best connection, we'll try to make with what we got. The reason I wanted to jump on a podcast before my flight yesterday is about 2 hours before my flight, the John Schreiber news broke. And I wanted to really give a full breakdown, a full rundown, give you my thoughts, try to interact with some followers, some listeners on what they had to say, get some reaction to Kylie McDaniel and why he was against the trade. I wanted to dedicate at least one segment to why this trade was considered to be good, why this trade was considered to be bad. But to start things off here, it's been very simple from the get-go. It's been very obvious what this offseason has entailed for Kansas City, and that is to be raising the floor. Okay, Ken Rosenthal wrote another piece on the Royals as to why they're making these moves. And it's pretty simple. They're trying to compete in the American League Central in 2024. I know the approach for a lot of small market teams or teams that are coming off 106 losses is to say, hey, hands off. We're not ready to compete right now. We're just going to keep trying to bolster draft picks. We're going to try to make these tiny minor league deals or these one-year deals, flip them at the deadline and get a prospect. That has been for years the thinking process of a small market club. The Royals took the opposite approach after losing 106 games. Their approach was, we're going to go out there. We're going to spend a significant amount of money. We're going to try to speed up this process and give ourselves a puncher's chance at the American League Central title. Are they the favorites? No. Should they be the favorites? Absolutely not. They need to be able to fly under the radar a little bit, be that sleeper, but it's kind of getting hard to take them as a sleeper. It's been so loud. It's been so out in the open that the Royals are so aggressive. It's hard not to notice them right now. And whether this John Schreiber trade is tied to the closer they were looking for in the past, maybe this is kind of what they got down to, was we really want one more reliever. The closing price, though, is just way too high. The closers out there, we're going to require a top 5 pick, maybe the number 1 overall pick to eat the chunk of money. I know Kenley Jansen was thrown around by some fans. I never saw it as likely, but that's what it was going to take. As for John Schreiber, you are getting a guy that wasn't fantastic last year, dealt with more base runner issues than he did in 2022. 2022, he was electric. He was one of Boston's best relievers. I'm sure the Royals are very much intrigued by that version of John Schreiber. The 2022 version's not bad. He would have been one of the top arms in the Royals bullpen last year, which brings back up the point of you're raising the floor. You are trying to make this team far more competitive, and if things go south, you're making sure a 2-game losing streak or a 3-game losing streak doesn't turn into 10, which is last year why they couldn't stop anything. The bleeding never stopped. It only got more vicious. It just gushed more and more and more because they didn't have any guys that could really stop it. It was a lot of guys learning how to be big league ball players for the first time. And for those that are shocked by a deal like this, you clearly have not been paying attention to the Royals this offseason. You know, at the end of the day, this is a bottom 2 farm system right now. You can like a couple of guys. I like a couple of guys. I certainly like David Sandlin a lot. And when you're trading prospects for relievers, you think that's probably happening closer to the deadline. But the Royals really believe if they can stabilize this bullpen, they can have that, Detroit-like season. Now, Detroit is a team we've brought up a lot, but Detroit finished second in the Central last year, had a putrid offense, but a really good bullpen. The Royals believe like they've got a better offense. They can have as good of a bullpen, and therefore puts them in contention for the American League Central. I think John Schreiber significantly raises the floor here. Can David Sandlin become something? Will he become something? That's kind of the thing with prospects, is you never know. Prospects are not a guaranteed thing. Prospects are kind of throwing a dart in the dark. You are hoping for a bullseye, even top 10 prospects. I mean, David Sandlin was the 19th best prospect in the system last year. So this is not like a top 100 you're dealing. I thought he was very good in low A, but he also struggled with command a little bit once he got to high A. He's also a college pitcher, and he was 11th round pick. Okay, so to me, it says more about the Royals' pitching development and what they believe they can do moving forward than it's just, hey, we can't figure out this pitcher. He's a lottery ticket guy. We really want John Schreiber on this team. To me, this says we want to make the 2024 team better. We have continuously tried to do that, thrown money at it. At the same time, we feel like we can have more David Sandlins. We can develop more David Sandlins. That's always the big difference in prospects and trading prospects. There are some guys you just can't replicate. There are some guys that are much harder to recreate, for a different term there. David Sandlin was not some 1-1 pick with lights out stuff. He had great stuff. He had good strikeout stuff. He also had an ERA near 6 in his last year at Oklahoma. His strikeout numbers were not phenomenal. When he came over to Kansas City, we saw a little bit of a change. And that excites me more about this deal, is that the Royals feel confident enough, as bad as it is to lose David Sandlin. Again, I loved David Sandlin as a prospect. You also never know with prospects. I bring up this phrase that Rex Hudler used after the Andrew Benintendi deal, and it's that when building a major league ball club, you will always trade a boy for a man. John Schreiber is a man. We have seen what John Schreiber's done at the big league level, in a bullpen, in a competitive bullpen. He can stick here in Kansas City. He's also got years of control. This was a rental deal. I don't think I'm jumping all over it. I don't think I am jumping for joy. And I'm not saying I'm doing that because you lose David Sandlin, you get John Schreiber, who was okay last year, but really good in 2022. And I'm happy because it just makes the bullpen better. I think it gives you some flexibility. And also, if things go south at the deadline and John Schreiber's really good, well, you got a reliever that you can trade, and he's got a couple years of control. So that's why I like this deal. This bullpen is night and day different. Last year's bullpen had barely any proven commodities. This year's bullpen is going to have a lot of different guys that can fill different roles. And what I love is that I was standing out there today on the complex in Surprise. I'm watching some of these bullpens. I can't really lock in 8 guys for the bullpen. There's so much competition, and there are some guys that I am high on that just may not make the team. And that's a good problem to have if you're a team coming off 106 losses. Okay, we're not done talking about this trade or this bullpen. When we return here from Surprise, Arizona, I'm going to tell you why this was the right time and the right move to make, but also play devil's advocate and say why this maybe wasn't the best time to make a trade like that. You're listening to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. I know this week has been a little bit wonky. We're giving you a Sunday evening episode. It's 4:13, so by my math, isn't it 1 hour ahead back in Kansas City? So this will be an evening show. And tomorrow, after we spend all day at the park, I'll try to give you a Monday night show, a Tuesday night show, and then probably a Wednesday morning show because our flight will be in the evening time. What I'm trying to get at is for our 5 episodes a week, not going to make that threshold this week. Connection problems were an issue. I think I got that squared away now, but moving forward, shouldn't have any more setbacks, shouldn't have any more issues. And I really don't need for that to happen right now. I know we're in a different room. I sound a little bit different. We don't got the glorious background that we have in my typical podcast room, but at least we got some signage right there. See, I'm already backwards right now on this video camera. Yeah, we got the signage in the background says Locked On Royals. But again, hope you like these episodes. Hope you keep subscribing, and hope you're as excited as I am for Kansas City Royals baseball, which is right around the corner. We will be down in Surprise, Arizona until Wednesday afternoon. And around, I think it was Tuesday, I was told today, John Schreiber is going to arrive in Surprise, join the Royals, and we'll probably get at least one look at him. I'm hoping to catch at least one bullpen, get some footage of that, get a chance to talk to him for some more player interviews. I know I said that about being down here in Surprise. They're quick interviews, so I'm going to try to find a way that you guys will be able to listen to that. They'll actually be played on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Just about 2 minutes apiece, and that's the way these interviews are going to be. Not many sit-downs, not many 20, 25-minute interviews, just quick ones in the clubhouse when the clubhouse actually is open to us. So everybody that's been involved in that has been fantastic from the Royals family, and can't wait for tomorrow. See who else we can interview to bring you guys either on Twitter or in a different way to listen to. Might be able to get them on Apple Podcast and Spotify and Amazon Music, stuff like that. But back to this trade. Again, John Schreiber is going to arrive to the team, I think around Tuesday afternoon should be when he gets there. So I'll get my first full look. On the trade itself, though, why I believe it's the right time, why I believe it's a good trade. Kind of goes hand to hand with what we were talking about to begin the show tonight. And with John Schreiber, this bullpen, I think, was lacking one more you know what you're going to get type of guy. You know, every time you look at a bullpen in Major League Baseball, the ones that have a lot of upside but have unproven guys are so hit and miss. And over the course of 162, you're going to lose and you're going to blow a lot of games. I think last year there were a lot of unproven guys that had high upsides, but when things went south, things went really south. There were a lot of blown leads. There were 5-run blown leads, 6-run blown leads. It didn't matter if it was in the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th inning. That puts more stress, more strain on the starting rotation. Now you stabilize the starting rotation. I mean, hell, one of your most expensive players is going to be your number 3. Now, the top 3 in the rotation are Reagans, Walker, Lugo. Last year, it was Keller, Lyles, and Keller. Or did I say Keller, Lyles, and Keller? Greinke, Lyles, and Keller is what I tried to say. So you have stabilized this rotation. You feel much better about where it's at. There's not as much stress on unproven guys to go 5 or 6 innings. Now you know what you're getting in Reagans, Waka, Lugo, Singer, and even Lyles from time to time. But the bullpen, I think they were lacking that one last guy to really mail it in and say, this is going to be our group. We feel good about it. They're going to save us a lot of games this year. You felt good about Will Smith. You felt good about Chris Stratton, Nick Anderson. You feel good about James MacArthur coming back. The upside of McMillan, the upside of Carlos Hernandez, the upside of Matt Sauer. But having one more guy that you can count on in tight games, 1-run games, 2-run games, it feels very, very good for a manager to be able to handle late game situations now. I think Matt Quatraro was really thrown into the fire in year 1. It was not a good rotation. It was not a good bullpen. They were in very few late game situations holding on to a lead. If they did, it was somewhat of a miracle. It was piecing together, somewhere between 4 or 5 guys to get it done because your starter couldn't go deep into games. So Schreiber really smooths things out here. And I think J.J. McCullough and John Sherman understand the fact that one of the best ways you can build an immediate contender, and I want to say contender for division, not so much a World Series title, but a contender, a competitive group, one of the best ways you can do it is having a good bullpen. 14 and 15 Royals fans should know that. Having a great bullpen makes everything easier on position players, on starters, on managers, on coaches. It really, top to bottom, smooths things out. When you have a good bullpen, you are able to win a lot more games than you even think you're capable of. Because there's going to be those games where, you jump out to a 4-0 lead, and then a team crawls back in and it's 4-3, and then it's 6-4, then 7-5, then 7-7, then it's 8-7, and you need to have guys that can lock it down. When you get to a depleted part of your bullpen, you're not at the bottom of the barrel. You're not, clawing for scraps at that point. You have somebody that can actually go out there and give you a 1-2-3 inning. Right now, you're starting to have less and less unproven guys in the bullpen, and that should be very rewarding to a lot of Royals fans that are exciting about this team or refreshing or comforting. Those are all things that I'm feeling right now about this bullpen. Could some of these guys get banged up? Could some of these guys not achieve what we think they can achieve, meet those standards, get above average stats? Of course, all of that can happen in baseball. It's a part of the game. But they have dwindled down the amount of guys that you are just banking on upside. And as good as upside and potential is, it's not really a recipe for success. There are some spots on a team that you can bank on upside and feel good about it. If you have one guy in the bullpen where he can be really good or he can completely bottom out and not be good at all, you want about one of those guys. If you're a bad team, you want about 2 or 3 of those guys, hoping you can hit on them because they're cheap, they got years of control. Feel good about that. Right now, there's about 4 to 5, maybe even 6 guys on the Royals that I feel pretty confident in looking good early on in the season. Then there's the upside guys. A John McMillan, who's only got 4 big league innings under his belt. I think he can be the best pitcher in this bullpen, but I've got such a small sample size to work with. If I don't have a big sample size, I can't really peg you as a proven commodity. I like James MacArthur a lot. James MacArthur has a much bigger sample size than John McMillan, but still a bit unproven. Carlos Hernandez has the track record, but we've had such a split from the first half to the second half. You go back to last year, those are the 3 best pitchers in your bullpen by the end of the year. Now you look at them, and they're not expected to be the closer. They're not expected to be the setup guy. I think everybody is going to have their own different role, and they're going to have to adjust from time to time. I even talked to James MacArthur today about juggling 3 different roles in his rookie season, being a starter, being a middle inning guy, and then being a closer by the end of it. He enjoyed it. He says, I even don't have enough experience to get caught up in or get too nervous about where I'm pitching. I brought up the Houston series when it was sold out. Astros were still playing for a division title. Back-to-back days, he slammed the door. He's like, I don't even know if the crowd gets to me at this point. I don't have enough experience. And you don't want to have 6 or 7 guys like that in the bullpen. That's no knock on James MacArthur. I think James MacArthur is going to be one hell of a pitcher this year, but it's the unproven commodities. You want to know what you're getting in the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Now, that's the good side of it. The bad side of it, to make it real quick here, the bad side of this trade is that, yes, you do give up a David Sandlin. And if John Schreiber ends up being just a bomb of a relief pitcher, just nothing goes right, command completely loses it, he's getting knocked all over the park, and a month or two in, he's barely even hanging on to a roster spot, that's why it can be a wrong move, because you can look at it and say, David Sandlin could have been a guy in your rotation 2 years down the road, and you wasted it on a bullpen guy that's not even that good. That is a possibility. That can happen. But like I said, there's no guarantee David Sandlin becomes anything. You can be impressed with numbers at the minor league level. You can be impressed with the advanced analytics, the advanced data, the sabermetrics of a minor league pitcher. At the end of the day, though, it's a minor league pitcher. David Sandlin is barely in high A right now. If he was pounding on the door of the big league level, maybe I feel differently. I think he can become something. I'm rooting for him to become something. He seems like a great guy. And, you go from an 11th round pick to a big league starter, all more power to you. But I can see where it can be perceived as a bad move. The Royals aren't there yet. They've got a bad farm system, and they've got very few good prospects that universally are liked, and you traded away one of those guys for a bullpen arm. That can be the downside of this trade. But to me, if John Schreiber ends up being a 2022 version of himself and the Royals can compete for a large portion of this year, it's worth it. Because he also can be there next year and the year after that, or he can be good trade bait to find another David Sandlin for your farm system. The fact Sandlin had a near 6 ERA at Oklahoma and the Royals developed him as an 11th round pick to being, by Baseball America, a top 5 prospect in their system, that says a lot more about this team's pitching development and how far it's come. They feel like they can do this a hell of a lot more often than you may think. All right, for our final segment, I feel like I got to start picking who I believe is going to be in the bullpen. Right now, I'm at about 8 guys that feel like they're in the top 8. But there's some really good arms that I think are on the outside looking in. I'll give you my 8 picks next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're also on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For our final segment on this Sunday night edition of Locked On Royals, we'll have a very normal schedule for the rest of the week. I believe I got all the connection problems figured out. Might be hopping on as a guest to another podcast here in the coming days. I'll leave that up for more of a surprise, if you will. No pun intended, being down here in Surprise, Arizona. But I'm going to let those guys announce it and not do it and give it away right here on this podcast. But look for that in the coming days. Might be hopping on Sports Radio 810 WHB to give a couple of segments to some of the guys that are wanting some Royals content. But I can't be more thankful to being down here, getting this opportunity. This is awesome. Had a blast so far. And it's only been one day. But I still want to make sure that I'm getting you guys the best possible content here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As for the bullpen, had the chance to see a number of guys throw today. I can tell you this with confidence. One guy that really stood out to me was Daniel Lynch. He was making the glove pop in his bullpen. And I saw him live against Freddie Fermin and Tyler Cropley and Carter Jensen. And I think it was maybe Sandy Leone. I think he might have been catching as well. It was the catching group that was hitting against some of the arms. I saw Daniel Lynch, saw Will Klein, saw Steven Cruz. So not some of the main guys were throwing those one-on-ones, those live BPs, as you can call them. So didn't get a chance to do that. But Daniel Lynch, he looked apart a little bit. He was throwing hard. Now, I get it's just throwing hard, and it's in spring training. And sometimes the velocity is going to have a bit of an uptick when the weather's that nice. But the glove was popping. I can tell you that. I also can tell you it's going to be really tough for Daniel Lynch to make the roster, especially with the addition of John Schreiber. I also think it's tough now for Jake Brentz to make the roster, who I saw pitch for a little bit today as well. It's going to be tough to lock in somebody like a Carlos Hernandez. There's so many spots to battle out of these top 7 or top 8. Now, to me, I think there's about 4 locks, and they're all the free agent picks they got this offseason, the trade acquisitions. A lock would be Will Smith. A lock would be Chris Stratton, Nick Anderson, John Schreiber. I don't think they're going to budge that much. on, being a big league bullpen arm or just probably getting let go. They're not going down the AAA or anything like that. Those guys are locks. I do not need to spend any time explaining why they were given 1-year deals or they were acquired. They pitched in the big leagues before, tons of success and tons of innings there. So those 4, they're locks. Then you get into the probables. I think that James McArthur is a probable, close to a lock too. I don't think that James McArthur is going to lose his spot in spring, even if he does struggle. I think that Carlos Hernandez is very much a probable. There's some people that say, oh, he wasn't that good in the second half. I get it, but he also was really damn good in the first half. I think that Carlos Hernandez is as close to a lock as you can get. You don't just toss away a 102-mile-an-hour fastball. Okay, he was bad for the second half. I think it was in a different role, much less pressure in this go-around. I think John McMillan is somebody that you can look at and say, he is going to have to pitch well in spring because he doesn't have the longevity yet. He doesn't have the experience yet. I think he can be really, really good, but there's a chance if command's not there, he gets knocked around in spring, that he wouldn't get a spot. And the Royals would want to carry another lefty. Then you get to like the 8th guy, which is Matt Sauer. Had a chance to speak to him today. Surprisingly a large human. That is a big man. Matt Sauer looks the part, has kind of a starter frame. I always say like a Roger Clemens frame, Not that he's going to be Roger Clemens, but you just know when Roger Clemens would walk onto the mound, when he'd walk in the clubhouse, he looked the part. He's a big dude. Now, I get steroids might have a little bit of things to do with that. Not saying Matt Sauer's doing that. He's just a big dude, all right? He looks like he's got a starter frame. And I believe when a team takes somebody in the Rule 5 draft, the Royals have done it many times before, you do a lot to make sure that they're going to make the roster because you don't want to send them back to the team you just drafted them from. You wasted then a 26-man roster spot in which you could have had a free agent there. So for Matt Sauer, who had really good numbers in Double-A last year and the New York Yankees farm system, even if he's not the best in spring, I think the Royals are going to try to find a way to ease him into some sort of a role. And when you can ease him into a good role, then you feel good about some rookie that's now in your bullpen. You could maybe transition in the future to a starter. Brad Keller did that when he was taken in the Rule 5 in 2018. But those 8 guys right there, I don't know who I bump out. Like, it's kind of getting hard to figure out who is the odd man out to keep a Jake Brentz or to keep a Daniel Lynch or to keep a Josh Taylor. Some of these guys are going to have to start out in AAA Omaha. I was asked this on Twitter of wouldn't they want to keep at least 2 lefties? I think it's good to keep 2 lefties, but who do I move out? It's not going to be the 4 they brought in, either free agency or trade. I don't think they're going to move McArthur. I don't think they're going to move Hernandez. McMillan, maybe, but that's a huge upside guy that you'd be stashing away in AAA Omaha. And then I don't think you want to send Matt Sauer back because he was a Rule 5 pick. So I just don't know at this point where you could pencil in another guy for this bullpen. I think those are the top 8 right now. And those top 8, I don't think they're going to move off from. Stuff can always happen in spring training, but to me, this is where I'm at. If you have a differing opinion, you have a guy you want to throw out there or mention, let me know on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15, or let me know on the YouTube comments below this video. Well, that's going to do it for day 1 of our coverage from Surprise, Arizona. No, I wasn't able to give you guys 2 today, but starting tomorrow, going to be pretty simple. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, going to be back on schedule. Connection problems are all good. Sorry I don't have some glamorous background. I'm just doing this for my room here at Airbnb in Surprise, Arizona. So as long as the audio quality is good enough, as long as the picture quality is good enough, that's what I really care about when giving you this coverage. Hopefully I'll find a good way to give you guys the interviews that I'll be collecting throughout this week. Won't be played on the podcast, but I'll find some way to get it out there for you guys and the listeners. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be at the ballpark from probably 8 a.m. here to all the way from 5 to 6 p.m. Might be able to do some pre-planning for the podcast, but expect an episode tomorrow night with plenty of more coverage from Surprise, Arizona. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.